introduction, so we'll just go to approval of the minutes. I think the councilman's got an editorial change.
Yeah, just on, under parking garage discussion, that first paragraph, it has a second sentence of, in fee, it says negation. I'm sure that's supposed to be negotiation. So I would want to amend that to say fee negotiation.
All right. Any other changes? And Councilman Schreiber did tell me he would not be here today. He's got family issue. Any other changes? All right. All in favor of the amended minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks for catching that. Item 3.1, Transit Mobile. Here, see Mr. Smith heading kind of sort of. It's Jerry. All right. Sorry, sir. Welcome.
You all know Jerry? I think you do.
Yeah, we met at a.
Our interim transit director right now. He's been with us for many years now.
Heading on that. Yeah, we've got a couple of videos here that just kind of, it shows how it works for the public and then shows kind of what the drivers are looking for when people show their phones to the public. It's really a pretty simple process. People can buy their, buy their passes or buy a single ride pass on their phone. And then, they just show their phone to the driver. It's got a pulsating circle that shows the driver that it's active and it's a good pass. And then we just get there and the transit token, or token transit, takes care of everything for us. And then the money they collect, they take out their percentage, and then they just send the money to us. So it's not much we got to do for it.
And just to tee that up a little bit, so on the council agenda next time is a public hearing to modify the fare rate at transit. And so we wanted to have, just to make sure there weren't any questions, informally here more at this meeting about that. Katrina was going to be here, but we can figure out if there was. She's online. But, I think we, if you had any questions about the feedback we were getting or how we went about that, she could answer that. And then Jerry, part of that from the Transit Committee, they indicated they would support a fare increase if we could get an app or something where people would be more convenient to pay. And so that's what Jerry was referencing. And we've kind of, it's a pretty straightforward app on this one because they don't really have zones and things like that. They kind of add us to their system, and it's pretty straightforward. And so I think if we can get this video to play, it'll give you a little feel what that looks like. So it hadn't been implemented, but I know finance has traded information with them about what they need to kind of get that going, and so it shouldn't be too awful long before it happens.
So how much will that cost us, the app?
I think it's 10%.
They take 10% of what they collect.
So if it's, right now it's $1 fare. If you paid $1 fare online, we'd get 90 cents, they'd get 10 cents. So if it goes to $1.50, you can do the math pretty easy.
In this short video, we'll go over 3 things. 1, how to recognize and validate tickets. 2, how customers purchase passes. And lastly, let you try token transit on your own phone. First, validating tickets. Customers board the bus and show their phone to the bus driver like this. Here's what the ticket looks like. Notice the pulsing donut, the time of day, and the denotation of what type of ticket the customer purchased. We'll hand out a driver cheat sheet for you to see all this in slow motion. Notice the agency, the color and motion, and the ticket and time of day information. Next, here's how customers purchase the passes. They open the Token Transit app on their phone, they hit Buy Passes, they select their rider type and pass type, and then hit Confirm Choice and purchase directly from within the Token Transit app. After purchasing, they can tap to use that pass whenever they're ready. Then confirm the activation, and then up pops the visual ticket on their phone that they show you as the operator when they're boarding. And then here we're back to the visual ticket that the customer will show you when boarding the bus. The customer can close out the ticket and view how much time they have left at any time. They can pull it up buy another pass, also pull up the ticket to show you again if they need to. If you want to try Token Transit on your own phone, you can just download the Token Transit app on the iOS App Store or the Google Play Store. Sign in with your phone number, and you'll be all set to purchase passes. Just remember, your agency isn't live yet, so you likely will not show up in the app. To review, we went over validating tickets and how to recognize them, showed you how customers purchase passes, and also gave you a chance to try Token Transit on your own phone. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out directly at info@tokentransit.com.
The thing that's different about a
Vacation's not included, so. But anyway, we just wanted to say we're on that, and, do you have any feedback of, what's the live? Well, first of all, we're gonna wait and see, with this meeting, if we get our fare increase, then that goes in there. So I think that'd be good to at least wait till then, but I don't think we're quite ready yet, but we're getting close.
Yeah, well, I've talked with them, and, kind of the first step is see what happens next week with the fare increase, so we know if we need to change things or not. And then there'll be about a week-long period where it'll be live, but we won't announce it to the public too much there, to give the drivers a chance to get used to it, to see what it's gonna do. And then we'll have a rollout date where we'll have, we'll get signs to put up inside the buses and in the bus shelters and stuff like that, so people can see with what they got. They've got this company has a rollout program and stuff, so, I would say, mid-February, it should be up and running pretty easily.
I would also point out that I think it's February 6th is the effective date of the transit fare increase if it were to pass at the council meeting. We put that date on there, so give us time to kind of publicize it a little bit, put it on the buses, let people know. We have a schedule that we need to modify, but we wouldn't do that till after it would pass, and certainly that's not going to be all reprinted and all that kind of stuff, but we can at least put some signs up and notify people.
All right, thank
If
you.
there's any questions about it before that meeting, just let us know.
Any questions now? Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for following up on that project. I guess we need any action at this time, so we'll jump to 3.2, design build contract with Burns and McDonald. Mr. Seaman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. In October of last year, we brought the concept of a design build contract for the biosolids upgrade at the treatment plant, and that seemed to be met favorably. So now we do have it's a scope and fee to do phase 1 of the project. And so along with that, there's a 50-page draft contract that legal is still reviewing. And it's, so the phase 1 would cost $1.2 million roughly. That comes out of the wastewater fund, and it would be reimbursed by the state revolving loan fund once the design is complete and we could do a loan closing. So I wanted to get some feedback and see if we can take it
The
forward.
action that needs to happen is we take the council would have to pass the contract. The total biosolids project's north of 10 million.
Right, 14 approximately.
About 14 million now, obviously cost escalation. So this was in they call it the intended use plan at DNR, meaning that this project would be eligible for and they intend for us to use revolving loan funds, low interest loan from the state to do the project. And so that was part of that rate increase package of projects that we talked about, and this was one of the big ones up front here. So something we don't normally do or haven't done a lot of is the design build contract, and so we thought we would try it on this project to see if we could garner any savings. There are off ramps as we go through if we're not liking the prices that the contractor that we're working with giving us. We can off ramp and do more traditional but bid process, but we wouldn't have to. So it's our intention, once legal reviews the contract, we'd take it to the next council meeting if this committee endorses it.
All right, again, thanks for the update. Any questions, comments from committee?
legal's still reviewing it, correct?
That's
Yeah,
correct.
just.
Yeah, we don't have a time
It'll be
frame on it.
minor changes, but no, I anticipate within a month or so, we could have it at the council meeting.
Okay.
So we'd like an endorsement of the process, at least for now, from this group to moving on.
Yeah,
So,
we
action item.
approached this,
Go ahead.
sorry about that, we approached this a little bit differently. Sorry, that echo is messing me up, but we approached this a little bit differently. So it's taken a little bit longer, just our review process, where we asked the consultant to provide us with some draft language that is modeled after AIA documents that they have access to, and then we go for a review. So that's quite a bit different than what we usually do, but we're working through it.
And you've got a line in here, we recommend proceeding with phase one contract. Is it, you're saying you want action on that?
Yeah, normally if we bring a contract, we'd bring it through here.
Okay. Somebody feel comfortable?
Yeah, I move to approve,
All right, got a motion to
move forward,
approve.
move forward.
Second.
All right, any other comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Takes to item 3.3, City County Sales Tax Projects Agreement. Mr. Bangy.
Yeah, and I can tee it up to start with, but, so anyway, we, kind of quickly put this together here in the last day or two, but, after Ron and I had talked about the agenda a little bit, but the, and so what we have done, and I've since got some feedback, more feedback from the county after, they reviewed this as well. So what we tried to do is show, you know, if we wanted to change our funding scenarios that we had originally contemplated, you know, what kind of the process looks like for that. But anyway, all we did, David went through here and did a good job of trying to, he pulled these out of the Eric Landwehr's presentation about some proposals on Wildwood and Militia Drive extension. And there was a line item in there for city-county funding in each one of those, so we inserted those into this table. And so the original is at the top, right, David?
Correct.
Yeah, and so there was a resolution passed by the council and when this was voted on and everything to highlight those projects, those four at the
Which
top
is
there,
this
which is that document, and that's in the packet. And so, I didn't get a chance to talk with either Ryan or Steve, either one, before this meeting about this, but I'm assuming that if we wanted to change directions, and I think council can do that, if they want to, they would, so we went ahead and said, well, what's that look like? So it'd be basically just changing the table is the way I would see it. But, you know, I'm assuming everybody's still good with the High Street Viaduct. And so then we put in the Algoa multimodal facility, which is something we've already talked about, and is, the county's moving forward on as the lead agency. And then, and so those are really the two projects we've been working on already in the new sales tax, High Street and Algoa. So we put the full cost for Militia and Wildwood in that table, and then any so what was left over is about 700,000. And we went ahead and put stadium, that kind of is because the next item on the agenda, we're talking about applying for some grants over there. So that could help us with that project. It would probably still be short though, if we went this way. So then late last night, I talked to Eric Landwehr and he said, well, they're in his mind, and I know Harry's here, but they weren't really ready maybe to proceed with construction phasing and put that in, you know, that formal request like this. And so they said maybe if we could all agree on design is the way I took it. So those numbers are much less than obviously what I got on this screen here. And he's got those in his PowerPoint there on these sheets here. And I want to say the Militia was 300,000 design money, and I don't, you know, that would be pretty full design there. And then the Wildwood, the updated design, he's got on here 60 to 75,000. And so that's I assume what we would need to do to change focus for this sales tax we're in. And that was approved by the council previously, so I assume they'd want to weigh in on that. And then in the packet is also project agreements. And basically, these are just modeled after all of our old ones, but I think the first one in the packet here is, which one is it, David?
I think it's Wildwood. is
Wildwood.
first.
So for example, if we were proceeding with Wildwood, we'd have agreement with, it goes through the city and county both to sign. It kind of talks about the project and the timing, and really the guts of it for us are who's gonna administer the project. In this case, it'd be the county. And just kind of goes through some general stuff about reviewing documents, things like that. And then what our contributions are for that project. And so so we did that for each of those on that list there. What that does do, though, in my mind, you know, really we'd have to pull back more on Monroe Street, you know, if we're going to proceed with these others. And you can kind of see the difference there. But if we're not going to proceed with construction, and then that makes a whole different scenario. So I didn't know that when we were putting this together yesterday. So anyway, so I guess we're looking for some feedback and what we want to move forward with or not.
So you're saying on the Militia Drive, we'd pull about 1.2 million back out of this chart?
It would look like it if we want to proceed with full design on that as a group, you know, the city and county both. The only thing I would say about proceeding with design before we're going to build something is, you know, you do run the risk of that design becoming stale, similar to what happened to Wildwood already. It's not that we couldn't do it, but that would be my only thing. And typically, if we're just looking for a corridor, I would suggest that we do more of a like a master plan or what was the term I'm looking for? Like basically a center line profile grade type design where we know kind of the width of the road based on the grades out there, kind of where the center line would be. And then, because I noticed when talking to Eric, there was some developer contribution thought and things like that. That way we don't lock it down. We don't spend so much money up front either, but also we don't lock that in so tightly that a developer can't have some leeway there. And we say, no, this is our plan. Something we did on Mission Drive. We've done this ourselves on Mission Drive and kind of shown a center line. And then we work with developers. They come in. So I might make that suggestion as a tweak if I could, but I know the Wildwood is already designed, and so we're really talking pretty low money there. So.
I think there was some thoughts also on Wildwood, maybe to look at a greenway as a part of the new proposal. If you could just introduce yourself, because we've got a lot of people online.
Sure. Harry Otto, Western District Commissioner of Cole County. I spoke with Eric last night. Excuse me. He'd like to be here this morning. He had another meeting, and knowing Eric, he might be behind the wheel of a snowplow right now. What his discussion and mine were about last night was the most solid numbers right here are the preliminary design numbers, and once we get past that, we're reaching out further and we're grasping more at the numbers. And he just cautioned that if we look at our numbers today, the most solid numbers are the preliminary design numbers. But when we get several years out on construction, we're doing more estimating there. That was his message to me last night. And I think it kind of follows a little bit of what you're saying there. But, you know, Wildwood has got the longest tooth of all of these, maybe a dozen years or more. So it's time to move on Wildwood, and that's the one that's a little bit ahead of the militia idea.
So you're thinking the 3 million that's up there is a reasonable number?
Well,
it's the bottom line there, Harry.
On this, the bottom line on the second chart.
Yes, it's the most probably going to be the most accurate number because, as you say, we've already got the design. We had to actually re-input the software because the software was so old that we couldn't reproduce some of the design work or the sketches or the plans of that sort. Yes.
And by making the adjustment on militia, I get really concerned about pulling Monroe Street off. I mean, we've made some commitments there. I think people are anticipating that we move with getting that 2-laned all the way through. So if we can adjust and get that project back on the list, I think it would bring us up to the commitments that we've made.
I hear you there. After we talked yesterday evening, I think Eric sent an email out to a number of us, and probably you're on here too.
Yeah,
and you
I'm
are.
on that.
For the Wildwood and Militia project, please consider doing agreements for just the engineering work at this time. That was his message, because once we get, we're reaching out a little bit too far to put it on paper and sign it right now. I think both parties probably.
So do you have a feel for what that number would be?
Yeah, he's got it in here, for just the Wildwood we're talking about now. Yeah, he put on this first page, he's still here, the one side, he said he anticipated it being 60 to 75,000. The only thing on this table, this is a little different. This isn't the actual, project agreement, so that's a different agreement. But we
Right.
could agree to that, it's a small number. But the only thing I'm trying to do here is give us some focus, with this, because we had this other chart, and let everybody know, hey, if we're intending to build Wildwood, if the council and the commission wants to do that, we probably need to reserve some dollars more holistically like that. And go ahead and we'd put it on this chart at the 3 million as a placeholder for now. It could change later, of course. But that gives everybody a notion that, hey, we're gonna spend less on, say, Stadium and Monroe, maybe. Our economic development's a little less there as well. And then militia, if we change that number and put it in a design, which I think was in here at 3, which that's pretty much full design for that. Again, I would, caution folks that maybe we ought to rethink that and maybe not go to quite full design on that. Kind of like we're doing on the High Street Viaduct. We're going to through a preliminary design, and that gets us pretty good so that developers know what we're talking about if that's the goal of the project. And so, like, for example, on the High Street Viaduct Bridge, it's a big project, and I think our preliminary number is, what is that number, 200?
190, yeah.
190, so you can kind of see the scale there. So I think you could, in my mind, cut that back if that's just what we're looking for. So I was a little confused on, after we had talked about what we're trying to put in this chart here, I guess.
I think Eric's caution was, we don't want super sticker shock at the end. And so if we're penciling in numbers now and say those are our good numbers, there's always a risk of a sticker shock later if we reached out too far.
So, just for planning purposes, I know during budget discussions, I thought we agreed that we would tag our different funds to the same process or procedure that we use for the general fund, which basically, in looking at the infrastructure tax, is very conservative, and tagging it to the same, these are all from the same sales tax. And so instead of 5.6 million per year under that adjusted procedure, it would be more like 6.2 million per year. But anyway, we need to decide whether we're actually going to use that, because in budget discussions, I thought that was the direction that had been given for each of these funds.
What I understand, this is a little different. This is the city-county pool of money.
Okay.
And they've agreed to 5.5 million as kind of a hard number
Okay.
for the 5 years. And if we're matching 50-50, so that excess number you're talking about would go into other projects, if you will, of the city, depending on where it is, yeah.
Okay.
So like, for example, in the kind of the area that David and I work in a lot, and others, Britt and Jerry and whoever, we have so much allotted per year, but we also take into account this, part of that is this 5.5 million to match to the county. Now, we can always go above if we want to and match above the county, or try to get the county to match more,
Well, you
if
know,
they
we're-
would, but.
we're in a little bit of a good place there because we did some conservative budgeting with respect to the anticipated sales tax revenue. And I think we were, at the county, we were up 6.8% year over year, 22 over 21. So that filters through this account, it filters through our EMS, it filters through our law enforcement, it filters through our general revenue. So every one of those buckets got a little bit more, and I suspect that this bucket will get more over this 5-year period than that we told the voters that we estimated. We should be short of the estimate, I'm sorry, over the estimate at the end of the day, which will help some of these numbers work better because the costs are gonna go that direction as well.
And I agree, it appears like we used about 1 year's worth of the tax as the match, so as we move forward, we may both decide in the, what would it be, to up that match number. And like you said, we can always readjust during this one.
Right, and then we're looking at the other sources. You know, we looked at if Wildwood could become a greenway and have a greenway or sidewalk, widened sidewalk function, maybe someone else can help fund that.
So for today, what do we need? And, you know, again, I don't know how we need to adjust, but if we can somehow work on Monroe Street as being part of that package.
Yeah, I guess, I guess we need some feedback, so we have Monroe on there originally, as well, and so we're not, looking at taking that off. We're all in agreement, including the county, that could move forward. You know, basically something we'll have to give a little bit if we're gonna add in a $3 million project is the thing. And so that's kind of where we're looking for feedback on that. We have been working on the stadium one because we've had some grant opportunities pop up on us, so that's what we were wanting to match some out of there, and that's we're still a little shy on that one. But we know we've looked and said, well, maybe there's excess sales tax money we can get for that. And David's going to explain that project he's applying or intends to apply for a grant on. It was a short turnaround though, so we had to hurry up and get it on here and kind of go through that. So, but if we're not interested in the stadium, that's okay. But we just need to know that we'll not do that. But it does have some good grant potential. It looks like so.
And with the new building going along there with the dental and now the
this
animal,
would be right there.
Traffic's going to pick up in that.
Yeah, and the stormwater is the big driver there that we're wanting to tag into. You know, we had the flood in 16 and have done and now we're getting into David's presentation. But you know, we had that flood in 16. Then when the council did a study for stadium in Satinwood, is what I'm talking about, where that intersection has flooded out a couple times at least since I've been around here. And so I know the fire department goes out and pulls people out of the water there and various things, and that's a pretty heavily used corridor, 10,000 plus cars a day on that one, and so that's pretty high traffic for a city, for us. And but anyway, but keeping some of that on there, so we need a little more than the 7. I just left 7 on there because that's what was left, but. And maybe it's too premature to, you know, take this to the council. We probably need to talk about it a little more, I think. But I just wanted to get it on here for discussion purposes, and so we can kind of see what something will have to be adjusted at least to make all that happen. So
There are several moving parts here, and
Yeah,
this is
it's a
one
little-
of them. And we haven't even, I guess, gotten into the intermodal discussion. Is that part of this as well?
yeah, well, I have an agreement in this packet David put together for the 800. It's Algoa multimodal facility, I think we called it, or intermodal, I guess, whatever it could be called.
Interchangeable.
Yeah,
terminology
I don't know
there,
what the
guess.
difference is.
Sure what the official title.
But yeah, I mean, that certainly could go forward, and I feel like the High Street Viaduct could go forward at least at this level. Now, we know that's short of money as well, but we're spending money as the city with a contract with Bartlett and West, and so, you know, we'll even that back out eventually. Same with the multimodal facility. They're spending money, and so we'll even that back out. So, and really, I guess, I don't know if it's Matt Pringer or Eric on your side, David on our side, kind of keep track of those numbers to make sure we're being even with one another and even them back out when we actually go to construction or something. And so, it probably needs more work, but at least we kind of have you kind of be thinking about this if we want to modify that and add in the Wildwood or Militia both or whatever, we can do that, but maybe give it another month and we can get a little closer.
Councilman Spencer?
Yeah, a couple points here. The Militia Drive, was that pretty much start to finish, or was that just in a section plan process with your all's number?
Well, so we're going off Eric's numbers, and they're in here. So and Eric also and I talked about this, is that if you look at his estimate sheet over here, the highlight is the total project cost. So for example, on Wildwood, he's got, it's fuzzy, 5 million?
Yeah.
$5 million total, and you can see there's 3 million on this sheet. So he had various funding sources here. 3 million out of the city-county projects, okay? And that's what we put on here. So that's what his point was. He's still pretty shy on some of these other, he was gonna, try to take some major thoroughfare funds, because a big chunk of this is outside the city limits. And then I think that's why he was going there.
Right.
And then he had some safety improvement funds that he was looking at. But then this last one, which is a little loose, at this point, maybe grant or developer contributions. And so to put the whole project together, this would just be a piece. Okay. And so that's what he was looking at. But when we sign, if we're, it could be the county might come back and say, well, we want you to put more in, or we put less in, whatever. Or we couldn't get the grant or developer funds, but the point of it was, the agreement was, we were at least gonna lock down, if you're gonna lock down, if you will, some money for it, that's what these agreements are for. So we wouldn't spend that money, we would reserve it in our budgets and hold it and move it along. But
the city's contribution, look at, for like the Wildwood, would be 1.5 million.
Correct.
So, but that's
these are the totals.
The totals, yeah. So, just trying to kind of deduct.
We're just trying to get to 11 million with all these lines.
Right.
And so I'm sorry, it's pretty confusing. Yeah, even for us, sometimes we got to scratch it. Now, wait a minute, this is the total versus the half or whatever. But, and the same on the estimate for the next page is militia. So a lot of people have talked about that. And so he's got a total project cost there of 3 million on here. The city county funds, the 1.5, so that's what we put on the sheet. So that's, 750 each, in other words. And then you come down here, major county thoroughfare funds, 1.1 million. Well, again, a good chunk of this is outside the city limits, more than half. And then, and so I can see that. And then the grant or developer funds, 400,000. Well, again, those are just kind of loose numbers, if you will. They're not, some developer isn't ready to pay that, or we don't know what kind of grant, he might be looking at for something like that. So it's probably, in that instance, it'd probably circulate more around economic development type stuff if we got some other contribution. So that would get him to his whole price there. And so, so that's what Eric's, once he looked at this, he said, well, maybe we just want to not lock all that money down just yet and see what else can move ahead. So,
this is the accountant, not the engineer talking. So, but I think how Wildwood would roll out is once the bulldozers start moving, they're working the whole stretch. Once they start moving on Militia, not so much probably, but they start more at the interchange and go south. There are some potential developers who are wanting to know what's the elevation of that road going to be, because they're thinking about what their plans need to look like to match up with that elevation. That's why this preliminary is important out there, because it could attract developers if it's a known number.
Totally agree. I guess I would really encourage us to advance the design dollars to both these projects, and like you say, we can then reevaluate.
Right. And those are the most solid numbers we have too. We can pretty much count on those numbers.
Yeah. I think the Wildwood is just sat on a shelf for too long. We really need to make some some ground in that.
Right.
And so, thank you.
Any other questions of the commissioner? Where do we go from here, Matt? What do you
Well,
need today?
okay, so, if we're gonna advance the design, is what I heard there. So I think the design, quite frankly, because of the cost, is much lower, obviously. We could probably not modify this chart and consider that economic development tool, and we already got economic development there. We spent 800,000 of that on this multimodal, number, so you got 1.2 left there. That would account for those design fees.
Yes.
And then you wouldn't have to modify the chart, it could just be paid under there, and then come back and modify it later. And then Monroe's still on there, there's some stadium money still there, and then once you kinda get those into better numbers, as they're pointing out, then you can make a different decision later of what to do. Is that?
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, I think as far as what Scott mentioned, moving forward with the design phase for both, I mean, I think we're all trying to work and trying to utilize as much funds as we can out of this sales tax, and if there's still opportunities to seek other funding, I know Luke Holtz-Snyder of JC Rep is still looking for assistance on some of these projects, and so, I mean, I agree. I mean, there's a lot there, and I mean, it just shows that, you know, there's a lot of projects that need a lot of work in this community, but if we could continue to move these projects forward, see what we can come up with down the road, and still make those decisions, I mean, that would be I think a wise move, so.
And I think it was our intention, assuming we don't have a staff, or, you know, we're got enough staff, we think, right now in time availability, that we were getting ready to start on an in-house design of Monroe Street, to start that in-house, so we didn't have to actually expend dollars, we just use our own staff to do that. That's kind of in our wheelhouse. Same for these projects David's gonna talk about, right on the next topic, but, and get through those. But if that's agreeable to everybody, what we would do to make that happen is, so these agreements back in the back of this thing that are called city-county agreements, that look like that, we would just go ahead and bring forward, if it's your guys's, if you guys are okay with that, and it has to go to the commission and the council, of course, but go ahead and modify these to reflect what we've talked about, including the High Street, and then the two design. I think we can just do the two designs as one agreement, probably, and then do the multimodal as a third agreement. So we'd have like 3 agreements, or they could, I guess, if legal wants to put them all in one big one, or however they want to do it. But those are the 3 agreements that are kind of hanging out there. Is that right? Yeah, only 3. So we could go ahead and move that piece of that forward, and that goes to council and then the commission to sign both. And we could do that and not fool with this chart at this point.
Do you need,
unless you want to.
do you need action from us, or just an indication?
Yeah, I think
that's-
an indication that you'd want to see those 3 agreements move forward, and we would work with Ryan and Jill at the county to go ahead and put those together, and we could have them on a future council agenda here pretty quick, really. They're pretty simple agreements. I mean, they just says who's responsible for pushing it forward, either us or the county.
Someone feel comfortable with that motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Yeah.
All right.
So there's a little legwork too. Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Chairman, if I could jump in.
Absolutely.
This reminds me of some other projects that I've worked on for my other clients. And if the committee and the council is looking for some mechanism for developer participation, then that's a project that I could, in the future, make some presentations and ideas to the council about how to do that. It's probably premature at this time, but there's a way to set it up so, you know, unknown developers at this time have a mechanism to participate in the infrastructure that they are going to eventually need. Yeah. And also, that echo is something on the city hall
side. So I don't know if we can get IT in there to work on something.
Ryan,
But
it's not
the-
echoing in our, I don't hear an echo here. It's just at your
Well,
place.
I think it's a feedback issue.
We can hear you well, though.
Where it's getting double looped.
So probably if you turn your microphone off.
But I got earphones in, so it shouldn't be an issue on my end. So,
Okay. The comment you made, though, that doesn't impact the action item that we have right now, correct? Okay,
not today.
thanks.
I just wanted to make the
Yeah,
committee
yeah, I
aware that
appreciate that.
there are mechanisms.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I think we both agree, the county and us, that will be a critical piece of it, so thank you.
So we'll need to go back and work with Eric a little bit more on these and get them tuned up, so within the next month, probably have them at a council meeting and county commission. They do one meeting, so it's a lot quicker with them, so.
All right, we've got an action on the table to proceed. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Harry.
Anything else on that? Thank you, Commissioner. All right, takes us to 3.4, TAP grant applications. Mr. Bangy, is that you?
Yes, it is. Thank you. So you might recall earlier in the year, or last year actually, in the spring, we talked about TAP grants, and we actually applied for two of those projects. One for the extension of the Greenway, they're kind of along in the Creek Trail, Tree Valley Lane area, and then another for some crosswalk improvements. And we were able to get both of those grants, and so those total somewhere in the neighborhood of $650,000 or so. So there's another call for projects out currently. The reason that this call has come so quickly on the heels of the previous one is that the money that was available exceeded the amount of grants that were requested. So ultimately, there's $1.1 million that's still available for TAP grant projects, and so they've made a new call for projects. So we are suggesting that we submit again for two projects. The first one that's on the screen is a Greenway trail that would leave from the area down here at St. Louis Road and McCarty Street and basically follow Boggs Creek, cross over Boggs Creek, and then ultimately tie into the Greenway trail system that exists inside Riverside Park. And so in talking with our Parks Department, they would be the ones who would provide the matching funds for this. And the total project cost would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $700,000, depending on exactly what we do with some of the work that would need to be done to cross over the creek at this location, whether that be bridges or some sort of raised crosswalk. So that's the first project that we were intending to have an application for. And then the second project is what Matt had been alluding to in kind of the previous discussions. And so what you're looking at is the intersection, oops, I'm hitting the wrong button. The intersection here of this is Stadium Boulevard, and then this is Satinwood. The new Portobello Place Drive is coming in here with some of the new developments, the veterinarian, I think the dentist is coming in next door. So we've had a lot of issues in this area with flooding, and so part of this project would try to be, address the flooding issue. One of the concepts that we've come up with, again, this is all just preliminary, but essentially right now the creek flows and comes underneath Satinwood Drive and then basically has to make a 90-degree corner to come underneath Stadium. And so there's a lot of resistance in the flow of that water coming in and making that 90-degree turn. So part of what we could do is actually build a box culvert that would extend underneath the intersection and essentially relieve the pressure that we have at this location. And essentially what that would be doing is upsizing this culvert, although we wouldn't be touching it. We'd simply be taking the water off of it, but the effect would be the same. So we have a lot of flooding issues going back. This section of the roadway actually floods because this water can't get through this culvert and around the corner, and so it backs up and floods this intersection. And so certainly creating a better system for that stormwater, is an aspect of this project. The other components that we believe that this could provide, certainly a nice division between what is going to be commercial area here and what is essentially residential area. So a nice division between those traffic calming effects. Right now, there's a traffic signal at that location. That traffic signal has some age on it. It's actually non-compliant in terms of the number of signal heads that are present. And so obviously, replacing that traffic signal with a roundabout eliminates that problem as well. And then also, it's perhaps a little bit hard to see, but the TAP grant itself would then would construct pedestrian improvements along this entire corridor. So the Greenway Trail exists coming through JCMG right up here, and so we would look to tie into that Greenway and bring that over to the intersection and ultimately through the intersection and then along Stadium, and that's part of the long-range plan to actually bring that Greenway Trail up along Stadium Boulevard and ultimately tie that back into the Greenway system that exists over by JCMG, or not, by JC High School, and also would provide opportunity for the Greenway Trail to be extended up along the new Portobello Place and then tie into the Colonial Hills subdivision area. And so that also connects up to the school, Cedar Hill School, and so a lot of nice pedestrian accommodations that could be made with that grant if we were to get it. Some of the more significant features of this design, again, just preliminary. Ultimately, we would be looking at the necessity to purchase some property, particularly this house, and then also, depending on what we do with the stormwater system, this house is also kind of questionable. So those are some of the main components of that project. Certainly think that, being able to solve some of the stormwater issues there is, ranks high in terms of, doing something at this intersection at this time. So those are the two projects. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Question?
And you also mentioned a portion of a third.
Correct. It would be this fellow's, the yard of this fellow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's what I figured.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But they've had a lot of problems, correct? The one on the left.
Right. These folks have flooded. I think they've gotten water in their pool in the past.
Well, their pool's built at the same grade as the creek.
Right. So if we were to take the water off of this, from this leg of the creek and just bring it through a new box culvert, that would relieve a lot of pressure on this box culvert and sort of the swirling water that happens at the intersection of those two creeks, which would certainly drop the water level at this fellow's house and should help him quite a bit.
Yeah, just to add in, so I think that was the 2016, this is a flash flood, not a river flood, so it happens, whenever. It could happen anytime, kind of like our surprise snow this morning, but, so that gentleman, we had a big meeting, and I think you and I both were there, and Carlos and everybody. It was very entertaining. About 30 people in the living room, but he had water in his house and his pool.
I don't remember the name.
I can't remember his name either, right off the top of my head. And then we had the other people on the other side in the neighborhood as well. Those houses certainly get, if the first one there on the corner, if it's flat to the road, right into his garage, he's got a kind of a split level type situation. The other house has a lot of problems below there. It's flooded several times, but so really the driver, not only did we have, we had some money in here for working on Stadium, but when this TAP grant, these TAP grants are pretty, they come out pretty often, and you can get 500,000 typically as a high end in those grants, and so we'll probably be. So David, responding to this last call, no one really submitted last time, and so we were very successful. So we thought, well, we need to put something in the mix if it's okay with the group here. It does take a council action to reaffirm, yeah, we want to apply for this and move forward, but they do have very shorter time frames to implement. That's why people are turning them back. Some of the smaller cities just can't keep them going more than likely. But there's also the idea we could create so that we can make maybe this box culvert's pretty expensive. So you can see it's going to tear up the whole intersection anyway if we do it. So we might as well, we got to put a road back, so we might as well do it right and, make it where it could be a pedestrian accommodation as well. So a lot of pedestrian accommodations go through box culvert. We'd have to adjust the road. And this is a pretty ambitious project, that's for sure. But having that ability to tie that to TAP grants seems like a good idea if we can get it. Now, that being said, if it's not successful this time, we have another round probably coming out next fall typically.
Right, it'll be coming out in November.
And it's a bigger pool of money, and so, we anticipate if the group likes this project, we'd go back and try it again if we're not successful. But that does take matching money, and I can't see from here, my packet wasn't downloaded this morning, right?
Right, so we
I
have-
think you're $2.5 million on this screen, and these are very preliminary, just like what we talked about before. But if, you know, that would easily match the 500,000 we anticipate we can get from that project. Now, if they give us less, we could always turn that down and say, you know, we're not interested in less, we need the full deal. But, you know, that, it's pretty ambitious, but it does solve the major flooding problem and has all these other attributes. So it checks a lot of boxes. I think it's a good grant submittal personally. It checks so many boxes and connectivities, but it does take that matching money, and we would anticipate, you know, this would come out of that city-county pool of money too, because this is kind of would be our stadium
Within that
project, if you
stadium.
will. Now, it could be, we haven't really ever decided on a stadium, we just said this corridor needs work, we know that. But when this come up and we got to thinking about this and how we could tie it to TAP grants, this seemed to kind of hit a lot of things, and it helped us with our stormwater there, so.
And Parks is already committed to the other project?
Correct.
Okay. Councilman Spencer?
Just real quick, I appreciate the effort. I mean, this kind of deals with multiple issues in one swath. One question I did have is, would there be any potential lighting upgrades for that?
Right, typically when we would install a roundabout, that there would be lighting associated with that, so there would be basically a light. Typically, there would be an arrangement of at least 8 lights at the intersection itself, one on each entry and exit point. As far as lights going back up along Stadium to the east, there are existing Ameren poles there that certainly could have additional lights on, or the city system that we build for the roundabout itself could theoretically be extended that way too. We haven't looked at that precisely, but
Okay, just was curious. Thank you.
Oh, and one thing we probably didn't hit is, you can see it extends to, is it Linwood?
Yes.
Yeah, Linwood Drive, and so when you're doing these grants, you want to have as many connections as possible and be able to talk about those, and so what that connection does, that's some really rough pavement, and we've milled it and overlaid it, and the sub-base is bad in that section, and it's been an ongoing issue, so, you know, we would hope we could replace that, but it also gives our connectivity at least up to Linwood, so folks that are living, you know, over in there could at least walk on residential streets to get down to this and then back to the Greenway if they wanted to, more conveniently. And just gives us another point of connectivity to talk about in the grant application. So that's why that, and it kind of makes a reasonable sized project. I mean, certainly we'd like to do it all, but you got to cut it off at some point. So that's why it goes at least to there, we're hoping.
With 10,000 vehicles a day, how long will this project take? 'Cause it's kind of an awkward detour there. There's not really good routing around that.
right. I mean, certainly you know, just thinking about it preliminarily, you know, Edgewood Drive would be the most likely detour route. Certainly coming down Satinwood, you know, that's challenging. You know, ultimately you'd have to be going on Yorktown, which is a very steep street, and or Cedar Hill, which is also a very steep street. So, but yeah, in terms of timing, we really haven't put a pencil to paper and to figure out how long that would take. But certainly it would be very disruptive while we were doing it. I would have to imagine that it would take us, just off the top of my head, you know, 5 months at the very, very best, you know, to get
Full
that done.
construction season, in other words.
Yeah.
Correct. Councilman Kemney, you had a question, comment?
Yes, and I didn't, if anybody had any more questions on this, I was gonna actually backtrack to the other one and had a question. So with this one, I know, I'm sorry, we've had some preliminary conversations with this in the past.
Yes.
So I was just gonna ask the question, with the property owner that's right there off of McCarty Street, to get to basically what was Mr. Vedder's land.
Yes.
To lead up to Riverside Park. Is that a right-of-way? Have we had conversations with the business on this? I know that was a topic of discussion.
Right. We had looked at this several years ago, and at that point in time had reached out to the owner and discussed the possibility of an easement, and he didn't seem as that was going to be a hurdle too high to climb. Yeah. So we really haven't gone back to him at this point.
Yeah, I just didn't know where that conversation was at this point, since
Right.
this is now, and if approved, as you said, we are not putting any money into this project.
Correct.
As you said, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, one thing I say about all these, we could draw all kinds of stuff of lines on paper, and it affects people's property. But again, they're lines on paper till they actually happen. And so even that other project showed a lot of property, issues there. It's not unlike we've done elsewhere, but certainly there's a process that has to take place to do that. So until it happens, it's lines on paper. So if people were to say, hey, what are you doing? Well, we're just looking at grant potentials right now. This isn't a done deal, but certainly we got to work with the property owners to figure out how we can get this done. And there's always potential that it can't be done. So when we get to that phase, but that's kind of, we got to figure out the money kind of as well. So.
Right, and since these would be federal dollars, all the federal requirements for the purchase of property, for the relocation of people who are displaced, and all that comes into play. So.
So you need action on
Yeah,
this?
so this was a tight time frame. So we actually, I don't even know if the agenda's published yet or not for the council, but we, assuming we thought these would be good projects, we went ahead and put them on there because we're not going to have another council meeting before these have to be submitted. So if you support them, we'll move that, we'll keep doing that at the next council meeting. If not, we can withdraw them at the next council meeting.
Right, so there's two resolutions, a resolution for each one of these projects that will be on the council agenda for the meeting on Tuesday, the 17th. And then the applications are due on the 25th.
Councilman Spencer?
Just real quick, because you mentioned it, and I was going to ask on the stadium proposal, the potential of property acquisition, the TAP grant. Are we going to be able to coordinate the timeline of all the federal requirements for those?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's certainly a project that we're going to have, if we were to get the grant, we would have to begin working on it right away. The timeline for the grant is 2 years from the award till the time that the project is supposed to at least be started. It wouldn't have to be completed in that 2-year time frame, but would have to be, the contract for the construction would have to be obligated at that point. So it does set up a schedule such that we would have to hit the ground running if we were to get it.
Okay, thank you for the clarity there. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and vote on these resolutions in support coming out of this committee as part of the informational to move forward to the full council.
Second that.
We got a motion and a second. Any other comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you very much. Brings us to Mr. Smith, Tuck Airport. Yeah, I think we shut it off a little while ago.
Mic on. Yes, appreciate the time, and I know we've already had a long agenda, and we got a long agenda yet in front of us, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. The FAA requirements are for us to do a selection of our engineering consultant every 5 years. We went through that process. It's what's known as a QBS, quality-based selection, where we're basing our recommendation based on the qualifications of the selected design firm. We had 2 firms submit, Olson Engineering and Javiation. We're both very, very capable, very qualified firms. And the selection committee met. We reviewed their submittals, and then we conducted interviews of both consultants virtually to limit their cost of having to come in and do the dog and pony show, if you will. After review, the committee recommends that we move forward with Javiation. Javiation is a firm that we have they actually have an office here in Jefferson City, which is kind of unusual for airport consultants to be that close to us. And they are currently our airport planning consultant. So this allows us to have both planning and engineering services within one house. The first project that we'd expect to be online for this team, engineering team, is our control tower. As the committee is aware, we have partial funding through a grant from the federal government in reference to the control tower, and we're anticipating at least the strong possibility of being able to get full funding through a separate grant. So at a future council meeting, the staff is recommending that we move forward with a design contract with Javiation. We have to work out the grant agreements associated with that to begin the design process of that control tower. Happy to answer any questions. We're asking for the committee's approval to move this forward to the full council once we have the grant agreements and appropriate contracts with Javiation.
Questions, comments for Mr. Smith? Action item for Mr. Smith.
Make a motion that this be presented to full council once the prior requirements are met.
Need a motion?
I'll second that.
You have a second? Any other comments, questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, sir. Takes us to item 3.6. Councilman Left. Then we just do 3.5?
Back in December,
Or you got moved down, sorry, yeah, I think you're probably right, because we bumped in.
I think we
here.
added one. Anyway, we
Yeah,
have solar
sorry.
panels.
okay. So back in December, Parks and Recreation Commission approved placing solar panels on the facility out at the golf course. And at that same time, those vendors submitted bids also for solar panels on fire station number 2. So in your packet, you have, and by the way, this Missouri Solar Solutions was the winning bid for the golf facility. So in your packet, you have the bid that was put in for solar panels on Fire Station 2 by that winning vendor. And it's been updated just to include something that's happened since then related to the Federal Inflation Reduction Act of 30% rebate or cashback to government purchasers. So I also anticipate parks taking advantage of that aspect. But anyway, you can look at the packet, but some of the benefits to installing the panels on Fire Station 2 is at 93%, projected 93% energy consumption offset, netting an estimated savings of over $4,600 per month. And then, so that means
Per month or per year?
Per year. Well, per year, right. For $4,600 per year. So that's 100% return on investment in 16 years on those panels that are 25-year panels, warranted for 25 years. So those savings, monthly savings, would be freed up to be used by the fire department in their budget for other needs. That 30% federal rebate of $37,000 would be returned to our 2023 budget if this was taken up and approved. So I met with Chief Schofield a few weeks ago to discuss this and discuss it moving forward with the project. I would suggest if we do that we use the sales tax G remaining some of that funding for this. The cost of this would be $124,000, but then we get the $37,000 back from the rebate. So anyway, that's what I wanted to present, and I think it's a good thing to do in many respects. Mainly economically, it's a good idea. So I'm open to questions, discussion.
Questions and comments? Councilman Spencer?
Just for clarification, what is a dollar amount that we have left currently? Our finance chair, she's not. What's that? I'm sorry. I'm just kind of curious on that. What was left of the gleaning funds we had?
Yeah, I don't have that here, but it seems to me it was around $1 million, from sales tax G, but I don't have it in front of me, so.
And this is looking at about just with city money, about a 16-year payback, not including the federal money.
That's including the federal money, 16 years.
Well, yeah, utilizing the federal, but
Yeah.
federal's still tax dollars, so it's. I don't see the chief here. I don't see Chief online. I'd kind of like to have his input into this before we do anything on it. I don't know what the committee's
No, I
suggestions are.
Yeah, I know so I don't know how long the bid's good for. This was done in December. I know it's still good now. And I know there's, once the rebate money from feds runs out, but I think as soon as we, the sooner we act, the better related to those two things. But yeah, I'm fine.
Mr. Smith?
Just a point of information, from our previous conversations, Matt asked me to look into some of these issues, and I have a meeting with Ameren's folks to go over this type of issue, not in a broader sense of solar as well, and that first meeting is scheduled for next week. I just wanted the committee to be aware of that.
Councilman?
No, I think this is a good proposal. I mean, I think we need to look for ways of, saving funds in the future, but I think, more information would be encouraged, like you said, with fire and with Ameren, and before we make any final decisions on it. But I mean, I like the idea of moving forward on projects like this.
Councilman Spencer?
And just for clarity as well, I would think it would be wise for us to have an open bid process, being that this is a separate project as well. I think that gives our business community the opportunity to bid on Station 2, being that this was kind of an addition to and not part of the original bid process for parks. So
I don't think that's accurate. I think this went in as a two-project bid, with each of these being separable alternates so that we could select. But I think it's accurate to say that this went through a full-fledged bid process and wasn't an add-in on the second part. It internally it was an add-in, but as to the bidding community, it wasn't.
And as I recall, they had at least three bids on this.
I would just prefer some more information on it before we proceed on.
So since Councilman Lester has brought this up in December, I've been trying to take a look at it, trying to figure out the mechanism here. Generally, these are done through tax credit programs that aren't available to non-taxable entities. Now, there was a carve-out in the Inflation Reduction Act for government investments in renewable energies, but the information that I am finding seems that it's limited to purchase of vehicles, and then on things like solar is limited to municipal utilities in their utility purpose. Now, I don't want to say what I'm saying is that I think from my perspective, we're going to need to reach out to some people that have an experience in this to figure out, is this something that we're going to be able to capture tax credits and then assign it to the contractor to get a savings on the contract? Do we somehow take tax credits and then have to sell them? It's a little weird, just kind of how this program is set up, and I think I have a pretty good picture of the bits and pieces of this program, but still haven't figured out the linear path of how we actually access the money. So just kind of in the same vein, we're going to have to do a little more fact gathering, and that may require us to kind of go outside and find someone that knows how this is supposed to work to get a final answer, because my research over the last couple of weeks is there's still some holes there that I'm unable to cover yet. So in the spirit of more information, just the eligibility for this project for this type of incentive, I haven't been able to connect those dots yet. So we'll bring you back some more information on that as well.
When Parks made their decision, did they factor that in, or did they not factor that?
So this was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. I'm not 100% sure of timing, but I think the bids and the bid documents may have been prepared before or at least simultaneously with this kind of coming out. So I just don't think this was on anyone's radar when Parks put out their project in the fire station project. So the timing there was really, really close. And so I just don't think this wasn't contemplated from a Parks or city perspective when we put the bid out.
But I guess my question is Parks anticipating having to
Parks
absorb
is not
the full cost? Or
Parks is doing this without
that,
the tax
that was
credit.
my
Yeah.
question. Councilman Spencer, do you
Um,
have a question?
to kind of follow up on the gleaning funds, I think it would help this committee moving forward with especially some of the discussions we've had previously on the agenda items of getting a hard figure of what we've got left in that fund, so that maybe might reduce some stress fractures on what we have on Stadium or Monroe. So I sure would like to have a number on that and updated information. Thank you.
All right, anything else on solar panels? Looks like more to come. Thank you. All right, Ms. Senzi, I think we're gonna get you on the agenda early again. Hour and a half in, but.
I'm gonna go steal the, Ann Stratman was going to present this, so I'm going to
All right.
hopefully do her justice. So with our community development block grant funds, we are required through HUD to put out a citizen participation plan. The point of that plan is to basically, in a nutshell, give citizens and members of the public get basically a step-by-step process on how all of these mechanisms work, and when they can participate and when public comment periods are. So we are, excuse me, we are currently in the process of updating that citizen participation plan, just to make sure that things are a little bit more clear. We really want to use these CDBG dollars as a mechanism to plug some of the much needed areas of our community. And in order to do that, people have to understand how to use this as a tool. So we are currently amending the plan. So the citizen participation plan was originally amended in 2017 to update. We try to update it every 5 years. In 2020, because we received the CARES Act funding through our entitlement program, we also had to update the plan there to be able to deal with the COVID funds and those changes that the Federal Register notice provided there. So the current amendment will incorporate an update to the public notice requirement and comment periods, additional public review locations, oral and written interpretation services, and that's really, I should point out, we can offer that for any foreign language, but really we're going to shoot for Spanish right off the bat to make sure that our documents are translated for all of our citizens, and also services to sight impaired persons. And I kind of went through this. Sorry again, Ann. This is Ann's process. So the public hearing process. So the purpose of the public hearing process is to have that formal opportunity for citizens to express their views on housing, community development, and public service needs within the community. And again, we are updating the plan to having both English and non-English, but Spanish plans that are available. We also have within the citizen participation plan process, it tells you how we perform our annual action plan and our 5-year consolidated plan. The public notice requirement is going to be advertised in the News Tribune at least 15 days prior to the date of the public hearing. We also have a constant contact list that any individual that is interested in getting the information straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, we can send out an email and all that information to that through that constant contact list. Basically giving an option of direct versus just posting a small print notice in the paper. Public review, plans will be available at the office of the city clerk. So if you ever go in and visit Emily, it's on her counter there right in front of her. Also the Missouri River Regional Library, El Puente Hispanic Ministry, the Jefferson City Public Housing Authority, and also available virtually on the city's website. Public hearing locations, all meetings are open to the public. Public hearings will be also held virtually and in person at City Hall. We've moved into a new time where it's virtual options are expected, so we will go ahead and provide those. We have to hold at least one public hearing, followed by a 30 calendar day public comment period. The 5-year consolidated plan assesses affordable housing and community development needs. Public outreach activities have already begun for our next 5-year consolidated plan. We have a survey currently out that is open until January 20th. And it's a long survey. We also had an informational meeting about it last night from 4 to 6 where we had members of the public come in and gave us feedback on the survey, and we kind of also, the point of the survey is for the citizens to pick out what activities we should fund over the next 5 years. We're also incorporating provisions for declared disasters and state of emergency. I think, with us having our 2019 tornado in addition to the COVID-19 pandemic, we want to have the options to trigger quick comment periods in cases of emergency to where we can shift our planning documents. That way we could use some of these federal funds to alleviate the disaster. But in doing so, we can't take 30 days to have a public comment period. So we're just making sure that we have an emergency clause there. We're also talking about affirmatively furthering fair housing. In addition to all the other activities we have, we are required to have an analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. That plan is required to be updated every 5 years. I believe we're in the process of awarding a bid to a consultant, and we'll have that contract before council probably at the February meeting. Next steps, public comments for the citizen participation plan were accepted through January 9th. We were trying to get it on the January 16th council, but we couldn't quite get our ducks in a row that quickly, so it'll actually be on the first February council meeting. And I know that was a lot, but do you guys have any questions about the citizen participation plan? Or any other CDBG?
Comments? But you still need an action item so we can get it on February.
Please.
In that motion.
Thank you, sir.
Second that.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any other comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. I think you're still up.
Thank you. I have been asked to give a housing and community development block grant disaster recovery fund update. The last, as you all know, in December, MHDC did not award any of the tax credit projects to Jefferson City. We do have the option, MHDC has the option they have that 9% low-income housing tax credit. That's the most competitive. It's open once a year. But they also have a 4% low-income housing tax credit. It's less competitive. It's open on a revolving basis, but with the understanding that MHDC as a commission meets quarterly. So you can have the possibility of the 4% being awarded on a quarterly basis, 4 times a year. So just to go over, and I think housing in general kind of gets wrapped up into a big bundle, and it's hard to understand and break down the different processes and different mechanisms that are going into solutions for Jefferson City's housing. So I kind of wanted to be able to drive this a little bit. I've got the city's website to go up. So anytime that you are looking for how the funding mechanism works, there's this star icon with funding opportunities. And this takes you to our page that has all of our sub grants that are available. So anybody can come here and look and see what funding that the city is passing through to either nonprofits, private individuals, or entities, or just how we're going to spend the funds in the future. Usually through this list, we break down the individual programs. So if you're interested in like specifically the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery, you can come over to that left panel and click on it. And this kind of has the nuts and bolts of how this program functions and works. So when we were declared a disaster area in 2019 under 445, disaster number 4451, it triggered Congress to appropriate funds through HUD, and it all came to the state of Missouri. So we're in there, Cole County, Holtz County, and St. Charles County. So when you're going through these, if you see the other counties, that's why. The state of Missouri had to create an action plan in which the action plan dedicated all the recovery funds to housing recovery. And because it's HUD dollars, it has to be affordable housing recovery. So I wanted to go through what those, and then the city was as the lead agency for all of Cole County. So this goes outside of city limits. This is all of Cole County. The city is the lead agency and had to come up kind of with a program budget and a proposal of how we would operate those funds. So we did within the parameters that we were given. Open this up here. Hopefully it'll work for me. Give it a minute for it to pop. Oh, thank you, Grant. So you'll see the spreadsheet that's up. We had the option. We basically, at the time when we had to submit the proposal or start planning for the proposal, we weren't sure where our housing needs were going to go. So we basically opened up every activity we could. Let me see if I can get this bigger because I'm squinting. So when you're working with the grant funds and they give you a list of menu items, if you don't open up those activities, you have to go back and amend the entire plan. So we wanted to make sure that we put funding in each one of the buckets. That way we at least have access to it. We do have the ability to move this funding around. So right now the programs that we have available, will have available are acquisition for demolition only, construction of new affordable housing for home ownership, affordable multifamily and rental. This is new construction or repair and rehabilitation, down payment assistance, homeowner rehab, infrastructure to support housing recovery efforts and affordable housing, housing incentive for replacement assistance. And then we also have the public service, which is housing counseling, and that's a required activity to have in conjunction with your down payment assistance. And the only thing that's not accurate here is we actually have $250,000 in planning. That's also required to do a community resiliency plan, and then the admin money. And in total, it's $7.3 million. So the only program that we currently have open and available is the multifamily rental housing in conjunction with the low-income housing tax credit. We have to wait for the state of Missouri to open up to produce their policies and procedures. And then that's the time that we get to generate an application, guidelines, and then put it out to the public. So right now we have 4.7 million in affordable multifamily rental housing. And and the reason why we wanted to jump into the weeds of the DR funds is the idea is that we want to take these funds and make them go as far as we can get them to go, stretch them as far as we can. So with the low-income housing tax credit, the only program that's available right now is if any one of the other developers or even a new developer would want to pursue those 4% tax credits, we could still have that funding available for them. I did speak with one of the developers just to talk about the 4%, and they would be interested. However, with the 4% instead of the 9%, it would require them they would need 5.4 million of disaster recovery funds in order to move forward. They are only technically eligible for 5 million. So they would still have a gap. So if we wanted to leverage the multifamily housing funds, there would need to be a decision made between if we feel like we need that housing now to have a developer pursue a 4% application, or hold on to that funding and wait another year until the MHDC process opens up again. And if you want to, I don't know if Grant pulled them up, but I kind of wanted to give you a look at, oops, wrong report. Let's see. Grant, did you pull up the other housing? Let me see if I can find it. Can you open up under the Public Works and Planning? There's a housing folder. Thank you.
So you're saying that you could focus a majority of those funds on one project?
We can shift the funds around. We have to make an amendment to our plan, and that's okay. It adds some more time to the process, but if that's where the money needs to go, that's what we do. Yes, in the rehab, and that's a fair point. So the rehab projects are only eligible for up to $1 million. So $5 million for new construction, $1 million, and that's specifically for the multifamily program. And if you want to know how those buckets are going to break down, we can go back here, and you can go to the state of Missouri's action plan. I would not. Grant, can you type in 115, please? You could read the whole 278 pages, but there's starting on page 115 is how the programs work.
Do we have a time limit for spending the DR funds?
October of 2027.
27.
Yep. Yeah. And multifamily. Thank you. Multifamily under HUD is considered 5+ units. And you can actually take a multifamily project and do, and break it down into, and it doesn't have to be all located on the same site. So if you wanted to do 5 single-family homes in one bundle, you could do that. If you wanted to do duplexes, triplexes, quads, you could, but it just has to be a bundle into 5+ units. So that's how you can kind of piece together how this works. I'm going back to the. Oh, where's my folder? Okay. So when you look at, and I got a lot of questions about, oh, I'm sorry.
Just to go back, you said that we have 4 million in the multifamily line item bucket, whatever you want to call it, and that could go to one project.
You can go up to, one project can take up to 5 million. So if you want to take 5 million and build multifamily units, you can do that. But, and that's where we're bringing up the development, and this is Stronghold's budget for the last application. So you can see there what they were trying to produce. They were requesting 2.3 million originally with the 9% tax credits. And this is, it gets broken down, and I'll go down to where it gets into the individual budgets. And it just may help you understand the process a little bit more and what the developers are putting together. So you have the total construction costs, and we hear a lot that the developers, they take advantage of the system. And so I'm just trying to, show how that works. So you see the developers, the fee including is $638,000 for this project, consultant fee for $100,000. The rest of these are expenditures that are required just for the application. MHDC, just to submit this application, costs the developers $25,000. They are also required to come up with a 7% allocation fee, a tax credit monitoring fee. So just to produce an application to go through this process yes, that's a lot of money, but they're coming to the table with the money to start that project. And so that's where it, if you ever have any questions about what the developer is going to get out of the project, you can just pull the application and look and see what they're producing.
If they go back for 4%, do they have to pay that fee again?
Absolutely.
To piggyback off though so let's take example for the Simonson project, possibly. What is the most that they would be eligible for?
So currently, I'm kind of in the middle of this argument with the state. Currently, because it's an already existing structure, they're putting it under the rehabilitation bucket to where they would be eligible for up to $1 million. Now, they would also, if you do this creatively, you could also look at this $1 million from here, but also remember that you have $1 million of infrastructure to support housing. So when you're designing your budget, if they had infrastructure needs, if they needed to do parking lots, sidewalks, stormwater, whatever they needed to do, that would be considered infrastructure. They could actually get the $1 million from that was available in multifamily and up to $1 million in infrastructure.
So they're only eligible, that's where I was getting kind of confused. The 4.7, they're not eligible for the 4.7, they're only eligible for a portion of the rehabilitation of the $1 million.
Yeah, so they got up to $1 million for rehab. But my argument to DED is, this isn't, just because they're not, it's not an existing apartment building. They're adaptively changing it. I don't know if I'll win, but I'll keep asking and, poking. But that's right now as it stands. The Simonson project would be available up to $1 million, and then also that infrastructure pot. I tried. Well, then.
Sorry, what might be available?
So then it would be up to 5. So that's where, as long as we keep asking those questions and kind of,
because that's a game changer for that project.
It is. It is.
So.
Yeah, and we're working, trying to pull every mechanism that we can to make what we can available to them, because we want to see that project succeed. Just with any other development that comes in the door, we try to work with them to find any funding mechanism that they would be eligible for and provide that for them.
Yeah, and with this, I mean, they're still subject to the same review system as all the other processes. So, so as a council, we decided we wanted to maybe push and try to assist the one developer that's open for the 4%. It's the same process. So if there's pushback or objections and stuff like that, it's going to make it still very difficult, even though,
Right, and we're waiting. So the MHDC process, they are required to operate by a qualified allocation plan. That's what I've got pulled up on the screen. So if you go to the MHDC's website and get into the rental production activity, you can find their plan. And this is how they're supposed to operate the tax credits. When you go, it's the rules, right? So these are the rules that you're supposed to abide by. These are the rules, the process of how you get scored. So the reason why developers want to come in front of one is to get community support. But the developers want to come to city council because it's points on their application. So if they get a resolution from city council, county commission, letters of support from different entities, points. So they're trying to get their points up as high as possible because that's what triggers staff to recommend it to the commission. Yes.
And again, to comment on the Simonson project, we have been assured that some of those potential concerns, the developer has already talked with the school district, so that one's been eliminated. They're comfortable with that project. Obviously, the neighborhood surrounding is supportive of it. So I don't see the backlash on that project if that's something we could maybe progress forward just because of that.
Yeah,
is what I'm trying to say.
They did receive some. So there were some members of the community that wrote opposition for all affordable housing in it, and really, and that's something that we'll be working with MHDC, or at least asking when they put out this qualified allocation plan, the QAP. They put it out and they open it up for public comment. One of the things that bothered me about the process is I feel like opposition should definitely have a voice. Like there is a reason that is a public process. These are tax credits. That's very important. But it should be given a scoring, because what this process has done for MHDC, it kind of triggered this statewide ripple, is it basically gave a recipe for anybody that wants to tank a developer's project. So if other projects on the list didn't receive any letters, and it's either because nobody knew it was happening, or it's truly a community supported project. So MHGC told this is an unprecedented for them. They didn't know how to deal with it, so they just didn't. And that's where my issue with that process comes in, is because I feel like within this plan, they should create a mechanism for how to deal with that. If you receive letters of opposition, -5, -10, whatever you need to do, put it on your scoring matrix. So it's still giving that opposition a voice and value, but it's not a death sentence to these
Sure.
projects.
But to be clear, though, of all the proposals out there, Simonson had the least concern from the public and all the potential impacted entities that would be impacted by that. So I just wanted to make sure
yeah,
that was
if you did a apples to apples count of, but they also received the least amount of letters of support. So it's, but it's something where, I don't mind rallying around a project just as long as it's fair. With the grant funds, it has to be fair and open to everybody. And that's why we do a scoring system, is to make sure it's ticking those boxes of support. And that's not a staff decision about who gets the funding. And that's why we do that scoring matrix.
And again, I think if we could have just maybe pumped the brakes on that at the council meeting that night and made sure there was assurances that thorough discussions had taken place with, like I said, with all the different entities to maybe alleviate some of the concerns of impacted neighborhoods. I really believe we could have had a different outcome.
Yeah,
but,
and anytime you feel that way, that is always, you always have the option to request it wait till the next meeting, if that's, and I think we talked about that a little bit.
We did that night, and
Yeah.
I don't think that was the direction that
Right.
the mayor wanted to go, so thank you.
But at the end of the day, 3 of our projects did get points for city council endorsement, correct?
They did, but it, and that's the other, the tie break was brought up by MHDC staff, and I don't think it should have been, but it was. Because
once
the points
council
were to get
acts,
the
it's a
resolution.
unanimous decision, essentially.
Agreed. But again, I think because MHTC had never handled waded through these waters, it was a little clunky. I mean, I don't, hope that's perceived as constructive criticism, but But that's something, like, helping them fix that process. But at the same time, trying to keep that balance, because you want it to be fair. And I'm not, trying to, go against the opposition, but they need a voice. They need to have weight to that voice, but I don't know that it should necessarily be tanking the application process. Also, like, just to
Councilman
update.
Fitzwater. Oh,
Go ahead.
Yes?
hi dear. Sorry, I'm joining virtually. But to address Councilman Spencer's comment, don't pin the failure of not having support from the city council on me. I know per the mayor's direction, we wanted to move forward with MHDC with the timeline they had placed before us. So there was urgency because of that timeline. However, we had several discussions in the past about this topic. And so, like Rachel said, like Ms. Senzi said, any information can be requested from council at any time, and timelines for action could be moved forward to a future meeting. So just want to clarify that the decision does lie with council for those kind of things. So I don't ever want it to seem like council doesn't have or can't get the information that they request, because staff will always give that to you. Thank you.
Ms. Senza, you want to continue?
Sure. I did want to give a little bit of update. Just since the housing needs assessment has come out, we've seen an uptick in private development. So we have, whether or not these come to fruition or not, but whenever somebody is planning a housing development, they come in and they meet with our planners, and we walk them through that process of, just getting their site development. And right now, we've seen over 100 units go through the door. Don't know, again, that's just planning process if it actually happens. But it's also a good sign that the private, in some areas, now they've been single family homes, duplexes and triplexes, has been what we've seen. So we are excited that we have some activity, because that's more than what we've seen in the past 10 years and on the housing front.
And I flagged that. I think that's an exciting piece, and I think it fits into the narrative from the past few months that we need a comprehensive approach, and this is a really solid piece of that comprehensive approach.
Absolutely.
And Chairman, if I could just say, I think some of us on this council has been going to HBA functions and really touting that the door is open at City Hall for contractors and developers to come in and participate and help address the need that is obviously there. We all know that. So I'm encouraged as well, and look forward to continuing that progress, and especially communicating to, like I said, to our developers and contractors that you're welcome here in the city of Jefferson. So thank you.
The other kind of, now we're at the, where do we go now? There's been a lot of, so there's Capital City Housing Task Force, there's a homeless task force, and then there's the manufacturers group that meets through the chamber, that both the chamber and JC Rep are facilitating that process. Out of that, after the housing needs assessment, there's been conversations about needing to have some sort of structure, a body of some sort to be looking at housing and being able to kind of facilitate the implementation strategies that we're seeing in the housing needs assessment. Because right now where we're at, the challenge is that, nonprofits have their missions that they have to satisfy. Manufacturers are looking at it. Everybody has a lane that they're looking at. So there needs to be some sort of structure that allows everybody to contribute to the solution in the lanes that are appropriate for them, but also be cognizant of kind of that balance of housing, because one sector, I think we start to see this almost as a very organic type thing. If you have one section of your housing that's struggling, it's going to negatively impact other pieces. So we're still trying to figure out what that's going to look like. I've thrown out a housing commission or some sort of quasi-housing, quasi-government governmental body, maybe something similar to Campo where it's more of a regional approach. Some of the feedback is there's a little bit of hesitation of having that live in government, and should it live in government? I think that's a healthy question to ask. So that's just something that the individual groups are kind of working on. And I know there's been some council members that have reached out and talked to me about wanting to work on, certain tasks. And that's what we're trying to do, is create a house for all of that for all that business to operate through. And then I think once that gets set up, we've kind of got everybody that's ready to work, and we can start implementing some of those strategies. And that's all I've got to update. I know it was a mouthful.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to take the prerogative to move us
Councilman
along.
Fitzwater?
Yes? Yes, Mayor. We can hear you.
Thank you. So to address Councilman Spencer's comment, I'm glad that you all are going to HPA and talking with the potential developers, but we have 4 developers that were on the table and ready to go and ready to build. So it might be worth us also considering to think about allowing them to move forward with development and get out of the and keeping those discussions going. Thank you. With those 4 that were actually ready to build and ready to invest. Thank you.
Capillary Active Transportation Plan. Ms. Williams. You've got some materials in your packet. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's on the bottom, yeah. There you go.
There we go. So we're still in development of our active transportation plan. I'm just giving you guys an update every couple of months as we're progressing through that process. We did some engagement in December, did some outreach to the public, continued to ask for folks to fill out surveys, and we're at the point now where we have a draft network that's been developed. We also have some guiding principles, which are goals for the project. And we're looking for input from all of our elected officials, our stakeholders, the general public on how we would like to prioritize our projects. So our guiding principles for this project are looking at safety, diversity and inclusion, economic development, connectivity, accessibility, and community. Those are our guiding principles. Through our surveys, we know that people generally prefer for both pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. They prefer protected or separated facilities. So we have 22% who would prefer to have separated pedestrian-only facilities, separated 38% separated multimodal facilities. Those are trails and side paths. And then 23% protected on-street facilities. So those would be things like buffered cycle lanes and bicycle lanes and cycle tracks. And at the very end of this, I'm going to show you our project page, which will go in depth on all of the different infrastructure types that I'll be talking about.
And I think you had quite a bit of input on this. How many people?
So we've had over 800 surveys that have come in. That was the first survey. So now we're asking a smaller amount of questions on just priority, just a couple questions on priority. So generally, when we're looking at implementing these projects, we want to look at stress tolerance. So the easier the project is to implement, so something like bicycle lanes or share rows, which is something just as simple as putting paint on a roadway, that creates a higher level of stress for the user generally because they're closer to that vehicular traffic. If you look at things that are going to be more expensive and increase the cost for implementation, it's less easy to implement. Those are also creating less stress for our bicycle and pedestrian users. So you want to try to find that middle ground where you can, but there are some areas where you need to put in things that are a little cheaper and you need to put in things that are a little more expensive. And so we're going through that process and developing those ideas. Again, this is a blending of several different plans. So we had an existing greenway trail plan, an existing sidewalk plan, both of those within the city of Jefferson. Holt Summit had a bicycle and pedestrian plan, and then in 2016, we had developed a Campo bike ped plan. So it's bringing all of that information together. So a lot of our line work, and a lot of the network ideas are pulling from those existing plans. So we did a lot of analysis. We looked at suitability, what's existing, and then does it have the capacity to support these different types of infrastructure that we want to put in. We looked at trip generation, so where are people living closest to the things that they want to get to, and did a lot of mapping and analysis around that. It helps us figure out where to prioritize that infrastructure and what types we need. We asked folks, where are they going? Where are they coming from? Where would they like to go? Desired routes are on that left side. So downtown, Greenway, parks, library, and then destinations are a lot of our towns and trails and parks as well. A lot of those overlap. And so there's two different networks. When you go to the website, which I'll show you here in a minute, there's a bike ped network, which includes things that are combined, and then you have just a general pedestrian network. Most of these surfaces are going to overlap with both bike ped. So you have things like greenways, side paths, complete streets. Complete streets would be something like you see up on Capitol Avenue that incorporates almost every element you can within a streetscape. They're usually pretty generally wide, very low traffic volume or low speed. Bike lanes, we have a small amount of alley conversion that we've looked at in the central city, inclusion of share rows, and then signed routes out in the rural areas. And so our pedestrian network would include some of those elements, as well as prioritizing sidewalks. So right now, the proposed network has this breakdown for all these different infrastructure types. So we're looking at, and this is new infrastructure that's in the network, 29 miles of greenway, 32 miles of side path, 28 miles of sidewalk. And again, I will stress this is across the entire Campo region, but most of it is in Jefferson City, just because we're the metro area. 1.5 miles of cycle track, 15 miles of bicycle lanes, a small amount of complete street, that's 3.6 miles, a small amount of alley conversion, 1.5 miles, and then the bulk of our bike infrastructure, which is on that ease of implementation side, which is paint, share row and signed routes, 56 miles of share rows and 169 miles of signed routes. So through the activities we did in December, we had a steering committee meeting. We've also reached out to the public, and then we had some boards for people to vote on at our workshops. We asked them what their priorities were in looking at our infrastructure improvements. And so number one priority for most of our group was creating those connections to essential services like grocery stores, library, medical services, things like that. Followed by repairing the sidewalks, and then completing disconnected segments, and then providing connections to our schools. For the bike ped network, that number one priority is enhancing safety for all those users, connections between existing trails and paths, so very similar to what the sidewalk priorities are. Creating an opportunity for alternative transportation, and then providing recreational opportunities. And so when you look at those lines between those two charts, you can see that other than this first one a little bit, you see that for the most part, the public and I'm going the wrong direction. The public and the steering committee and those workshop attendees, their ideas about priorities line up pretty well. So as we get more folks to take this survey about priorities, that may shift and change just a little bit, but likely it'll stay lined up with what we currently have. So our next steps, as we're finalizing that prioritization in January and February, I'm going out to all the communities to talk to them. So I just went to the Holt Summit Board of Aldermen the other night. I've talked to the Parks Commission. I'll be talking to the county commissions and then all of our communities to ask them to definitely take our prioritization survey. We'll have a steering committee meeting in March. If you have not attended one of those and you would like to attend one, I welcome you to attend one. We should have some probable cost estimates and phasing and some recommendations about our code and how we could make some changes to that, not just in Jefferson City, but maybe in some of our small communities. We'll have another in-person steering committee and public meeting in April where we'll seek out some more engagement on that. In your packet, you have this flyer, and it includes a link to get to the draft network, which I'm going to show. And then on the right is a QR code and a link that'll take you directly to the survey, so you don't have to dig it out of the network page. And Grant, if you want to switch over to that page. So if you go to our project page, which is that link on the left of that flyer, you can look at our workshop materials, you can look at our guiding principles, you can check out kind of what we've done so far with this project. And then it goes in depth on each individual type of infrastructure that we're talking about constructing. And some of these items are new to our community, and some of them are new to mid-Missouri in general. So this is, they're making recommendations for things that they've seen as best practices in other parts of the country. Those survey questions are actually in this project page, so you can click on one of these links and you can take the survey that way if you want to. You can even still take the original survey if you want to. But the draft networks are available here as these interactive maps. So say you want to look at our sidewalk plan or our bike ped plan, you can go in here, expand this, and you can zoom in and you can look at these different projects. So, maybe we want to look at Stadium and see what's there. We already have line work on here from other plans that say that we need to make some pedestrian improvements here, and that might cut across to this other spot. And I think Matt had talked before about putting lines on maps. They're a suggestion until we really design them. So this just gives the idea of that. But you could do that for both of these, and you can look in different communities if you want to and see what those connections look like. But what we would like for you to do is definitely take this prioritization survey if you would, which lets us know, what is the most important elements to you in terms of putting in sidewalks and bike ped infrastructure. So, any questions?
Questions or comments, Councilman Spencer?
Goes back to some other surveys on our website. If we could just get a hot link of like community input or community surveys, to where all those surveys are kind of all in one spot on our website. It's kind of a little bit clunky to find some of this, and I like to share that stuff out with my ward residents, and it's just kind of hard to navigate sometimes.
I think most staff is fully supportive of that.
We're getting thumbs up.
I know
implementation and who's responsible for that is sometimes a challenge, but yes, we all really desire for there to be an easy way for people to take our surveys and to interact with us.
800 of people to participate in this, I think that's a pretty doggone good number there.
Yeah, and I would stress that, in order to get numbers like that, we have to go out to the public. And so that was a lot of, boots on the ground activity, which staff can only handle so much of that. And so given our current staffing with our planning staff, it's hard to do that outreach. We have to leverage, folks like you are going to, going to the Optimists or Rotary and asking them to do more outreach as well. But that all takes time and staff.
We just need to maximize our technology to its potential. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Chair, sorry.
Councilman
No, I was just going to say, I appreciate all the work that you've and staff have done on this, and I know that when you talk about outreach, I know you guys were out living windows, beating the streets, getting surveys, and I think there was a lot of input there. And just earlier we talked about those TAP grant opportunities, and I think coupled that with what you're doing here, I think are great ways of leveraging these monies so we can keep people off the streets with bikes and pedestrians and things that we can. So I appreciate all the work that you do to do that.
Yeah, it takes a team. It's a team of people, across multiple departments to do this. I've been working very closely with Public Works, with Rachel's group, with Parks, our central maintenance is actually who built that bike for us that we took down to Living Windows. We work with transit to make sure we're getting, that in tune. So it's a big team effort to make sure that we're doing everything we can.
Thanks. Citizen opportunity to address. I don't see anyone in the room. Is there anyone online that was anticipating addressing the committee? All right, we're going to move ahead.
Councilman Fitzwater?
Councilwoman Ward.
Yes, good morning. Are you hearing an echo? Because I'm hearing an echo on my end.
Mr. Melvin said he's heard an echo. We're not hearing it in the room.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry?
Then I'll try not to let it affect how I'm speaking on my end.
Mr. Melvin said if you have
But
earphones,
I had
that will help.
spoken.
He
I'm
said
sorry?
if you have earphones, that will help you on your end.
Yeah, I don't have them hooked up.
I could do that
It's
too.
fine. I had spoken to you yesterday regarding the topic I would like to bring forward for discussion, and I appreciate you and city staff speaking to me yesterday regarding 126 East Dunklin. City Council received an email yesterday that included an investigative report letting us know of the critical condition that building is in, and a demolition bid process is going to begin on that. And I know Old Munichburg Association has interest in creating a cultural arts district in this area. And if that building does have to be lost, we would like a consideration of leaving perhaps the facade during the demolition. Since speaking to several staff members, I understand that access from the alley to demo would be very difficult to do, so it may only be able to be done from the front of the building. So this may not be able to be done, but I was just wondering if in the bid process we could allow for the potential of leaving the facade to integrate that step in the bid process.
I don't know who would respond to that. I think the memo come out from you, Mr. Sanders. I don't know if you're prepared to address that piece of it.
I would think that piece of it, Ryan might be able to give some advice on because of the legal issues of. He tells me, don't practice law, so.
I like that.
Yeah. So the bid package went out to essentially go get a price. I would want to talk to Leanne in our purchasing division, but the possibility of doing a amendment to the bid and asking for an alternate that leaves the facade, I think it was within the realm of possibility. We had a fairly short turnaround on that bid. 2 weeks which is essentially the absolute minimum we'll ever put any bid out for. So it may require adding a little bit of time to that bid package, but we have a pre-bid Wednesday, and so if we got out an alternate and then made it clear what we were looking for as part of the pre-bid to give us an alternate and see what it would take, if even possible, because of the access issues, then that'd probably be the best way to handle it, is to see how the professionals would handle that and what it would cost, and if it's even in the realm of possibility.
Mr. Helmick, were you going to add to?
I was just called up here, so
Oh,
I can
okay.
answer
Yeah,
any questions that
that's
you might
fine.
have.
I didn't want to put you on the spot. And and I apologize if it's in that document. I tried to go through it. I know there's a cost estimate in there. Where are the funds going to come from? Whether it's I think it was $200,000 to $500,000. So
Yeah,
even if we get the approval, we're going to have to find
there's
the
an
dollars.
absolute funding issue. I won't speak for Steve or speak for any of the fine folks surrounding me. But there is a little bit of money in demolition that was allocated for ARPA, but probably not enough to cover this project. So funding is going to be an issue. We're going to have to figure out where that's going to come from. So it's something that we are thinking about and actively trying to work on. But no, you've hit the nail on the head there. Is that there's definitely a funding piece that's going to have to correspond with this as well. But it highlights why we thought it was important to go out and get a price, because if it's $200,000, that's a very different question of if it's $500,000. So we thought it was important to go out and get that number before we really dig into the funding component as well. But it's something to be thinking about.
Councilwoman Ward, does that put a marker for you? Were you able to hear Ryan's comments?
Yes.
That they will take
Yes,
that under consideration?
and I appreciate the consideration. It would eliminate, a hole in that historic block that, that's intact. So it would make it look like it would retain the historic streetscape of that block. And then behind that, Old Munichburg has considered, making that a cultural arts area with seating and kind of like we did up on East High with the Hope water fountain.
Yeah, and I don't want to put words in Councilman Spencer's mouth, but he went over and looked at it yesterday and took a picture, and you're right, the facade looks like it's a intact building there, so.
Yeah, I mean, just from a quick assessment, I mean, it's had recent window replacement. And when I say recent, I'm talking 10, 15 years probably.
Yeah.
From the outside, just driving by, it doesn't look that bad. So, but with the supporting documentation here,
yeah,
I
there's
see
a
the
there's a
concern.
very interesting story that goes along with all of that, and I'll save it for some other time. But yes, the facade is probably the only thing that's still in any type of decent shape. The front facade, yeah, the back facade is shot. Just to reminder, still privately owned, and so if there is an acquisition process, that's a different thing that we'd have to talk about. But we're having some current experience that could help inform that in the future. Although the Southside Community Improvement District did go through the Missouri Abandoned Buildings Law, and they have some rehabilitation rights that were granted by court order in that. So a project could go through in conjunction with the Southside SID because they have existing court rights. Maybe a question for another day in a process, a conversation in the future. Our immediate concern is the structure and its impact on the neighborhood and the surrounding buildings. But all very good thoughts. But I don't want to give the impression that converting that into some sort of quasi-public or cultural arts use is quick or easy. So there's some processes that'll go along with that as well.
Thank you for bringing that forward. Seems like you've got a lot of support within the room if we can figure out a way to do it. So
yeah, staff would appreciate some formal direction from this committee to add an alternate to that bid, just so that we can proceed forward knowing that we have support of this committee. That would be appreciated.
Can you kind of guide us as to what that action
Yeah.
ought
So I think an appropriate motion would instruction to add to the existing bid a alternate that would attempt to save the front facade.
Somebody feel comfortable making that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Councilman Spencer.
I'll second that.
Councilman Lester seconding. Any other comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Councilwoman. Great job.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much. I
Councilwoman.
appreciate it.
Councilman Lester's got a comment. You may want to listen.
Just related comment. So this is the second time within a decade where we're seeing this type of thing happen because of water infiltration on these older structures. I think we need to have and then these costs come to us for hundreds of thousands of dollars to take care of it. I think we, at a later point and soon, I think we need this discussion about how we can try to prevent this in the future from this type of thing happening with the historic older structures, which Dunklin is also in that category, as well as downtown. That we know there's some requirement related to roofs and prevention of this type of water infrastructure damaging to this extent, and then it falls on the public tax dollars to deal with it. And we're not talking about small amounts of money here. So, and there's all sorts of other problems related to even that. So anyway, I think we need that discussion.
If I may, we have sort of begun to address that with our survey of the unreinforced masonry buildings downtown, and then also the Paul Brune. Yes, in the old Municburg area. So we have kind of started to do that and get monies available. So we do have an idea of which buildings are either, you know, red or yellow or green. So we have made steps in that direction. Now, a program to help the property owners, yeah, certainly that's
right.
Possible
I
discussion.
appreciate that. I know that, and that's certainly been needed. I think we need maybe some regulatory oversight related to that particular problem with these older buildings and their roofs and water infiltration that does this very, you know, and you don't know about it until it's too late, it seems like, in our current structure.
Councilman Spencer?
So as part of the, could we add that to be an adder as far as gaining, if there's a commercial business running out of there, to where as part of their relicensure, to where they have to provide that they have had a recent inspection on those particular structural elements of the building to be able to gain relicensure each time. I don't think we could put that on as another burden on our staff to do those. I think it should come from a third independent party as part. You know, you have to show that. I mean, I think you would even want to even add that you have adequate insurance coverage, those kinds of things. I mean, so just a thought.
It's an interesting thought, and it's ringing some very, very deep bells in the back of my head of a similar program in another community. Let me take a look at that.
Thank you.
It's an interesting thought.
Great, thanks. I think we're going to move on to parking, I believe.
Yes, I know that, you know, we're probably at the 50-yard line trying to make it all the way down the field, but I'll try to be as brief as I can. First off, within your packet is the public input that we received. As a committee will remember, we were asked during the work session to open up a public comment period, and we did that at the latter parts of November and held that until the beginning, right at Christmas time. We received a few comments. We did publish that with a press release, and I had interviews with multiple media outlets trying to get, solicit input. To summarize the input, I think the vast majority of the input was that we should be looking at a newer structure as opposed to trying to do a major rehabilitation of the existing garage as a result. Beyond that, there was also some other comments involving making improvements to the garage in the interim, et cetera. So we're just wanted to present those comments to you for your information, and we'll be having more discussions as time goes by. If I could just take a moment to talk about some of the other things going on in parking just briefly. First off, our parking app. We have very, very close to being able to roll that out and would hope that we'll actually have it implemented prior to our next meeting. I put together just a quick PowerPoint here, some of the slides of what it would look like. First off, the app can be purchased in, I use the Apple product, so this is the iTunes, but it's available in Android as well. It's Passport Parking app. So what happens when you open up the app, it asks you for a zone number. And that's really what we're waiting on at this point is the stickers that have the numbers of which zone you'll be in to use it. So if you enter a zone number, you'll do new session, you'll enter a zone number. In this case, I entered 65155, which is the 100 block of Jefferson Street. And you can see at the bottom, I had pre-populated. These are just test vehicles. We still have it in test mode at this point. But you could pre-populate it with your vehicle information. So in this case, I picked one of my vehicles, test vehicle, not a Tesla, test vehicle. It brings up, and I did that this morning, and you can see that the black bar down at the bottom is we're in prepaid. So I was doing this about 6 o'clock in the morning as I was watching it snow for the light dusting of snow that we got that's 1.5 inches thick out there. But anyway, so I put in my time of an hour. It brings me, tells me that I'm paid up through 9 o'clock. The cost, hit continue, the cost is $1 for the parking fee. And then as you can see, there is a convenience fee added on to it of 35 cents. That's the middle screen that you see there. 35 cents, 25 cents of that is to our vendor. 10 cents of that is to help cover our banking fees that we have associated with the credit card. So I confirm payment here, and I've now parked. It's just to show you an addition. If I'm in the Capitol building and now my meeting is going along, I can hit that add time button and it'll bring up, and for an additional $1 an hour, I can add time and extend my time. It'll also give you prompts as your time is about to expire. That's just a brief overview of what the app's going to look like. And as I said, we're hopefully that we'll be in full implementation in the next month. We're currently testing. We found a few bugs. For instance, the prepay function wasn't working when we first started. We've worked with our vendor and gotten that taken care of, and other things like that. But when we're testing all the zones and making sure we have the right rate, the right time limits, et cetera. Happy to answer any questions about that.
Questions?
It's good news.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Anything else? All right, takes us back to Ms. Sunzi, Neighborhood Service Grant Update.
I gotta turn that mouse on. Yeah, I got it. It's right here. I got it. I just hadn't turned on the mouse. My apologies. Let's go through this monthly update. With our EDA grant, we are still trying to work out the terms of the programmatic agreement. We do have a larger meeting with all involved stakeholders, and that's on February 1st, I believe, with the state. So it'll be our state partners, EDA, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, DNR, and the SHPO. There were lots of questions about how it impacted the overall development of the site. When we originally submitted the environmental for the EDA project, we included all of the property that the city owned, which has now includes the One Health Lab that's across the street from Chestnut, because that was originally city-owned property. So there's lots of questions, understandably, from the state, so we're going to have everybody at the table to be able to work that out. So hopefully we can come up with terms of mitigation and a process on how to move forward with the site.
So just to make sure that there's an understanding of kind of what that means. When you remove a cultural resource, you have to mitigate the impact, and so it's essentially trying to figure out what are things that add value to the site that help mitigate or cancel out the negative impacts from removing a cultural resource. And so what we're trying to work on with the state and SHPO and our EDA partners is what's that level of things that have to be put back into the site and programs that have to be created in order to offset the negative impacts from taking away a cultural resource. You know, portions of the wall and, you know, just transforming it from a historic site into something else. And so that's what we're working on, is how much, who's responsible, and where's it going to happen. So just to try to cut through the jargon a little bit there.
Right, and to add to that, we're trying to do it for the entire site with anticipation of future funding. So it would have been maybe a little bit simpler to do it just for the EDA project, but because we think that we're going to pull more funds in, so it just adds a layer, and it takes more time up front, but I think it's going to be the best product that we can produce in being able to roll a little bit once the construction activities actually start. Also with EDA, we've been working through the regional planning, Mid-Missouri Regional Planning Commission, and also with Jefferson City Regional Economic Partnership. We did get a draft of the broadband infrastructure plan for Cole County, and we're currently reviewing that draft, but we also want to make sure that we get it out in time for kind of the broadband challenge, which is, I think, in 2 days on the 14th. Finley Engineering has provided the draft. Shows that 18%, so remember those FCC maps that I pulled up that showed that Cole County was 100% built out? No, about 18% of Cole County is unserved or underserved, and those are the actual numbers that Finley Engineering found. Unserved means that you get less than 25 megabytes per second of download speed and 3 megabytes per second of upload speed. Underserved means you get less than 100 megabytes per second of download speed and 20 of upload speed. So that the benchmark is that 100-20, and it's all about how fast your service is. On the back of your packet, I actually provided the process for how you work through these. If you want to pull up the FCC map to see how your community is shown, you're more than welcome to use this link. We also have the process for individual challenges. And it's very important to understand that I'm not going to be able to open this because I don't have the control factor. But you open it up, and at the end of your packet is the directions on how you do an individual challenge. If you are in an area of Cole County or Jefferson City, and you are one of those unserved or underserved, either a business or your home, you could go to this challenge process and you say, I do not have access to service. And it's important to denote that this doesn't mean that your service provider is not providing you with adequate service. If you're not getting adequate service through an internet provider that you have, there is a different process for filing a complaint about that. So if they are saying that they're providing you with high-speed internet and you're not getting that high-speed internet, that's not this process. Not that there's not value to it, but this is specifically for no internet or hotspots, that kind of lack of service or under service. So please take a look at that. We'll be forwarding getting with the Regional Planning Commission to see how we can take our plan and give it to the state. And hopefully FCC will accept that and be able to update our mapping based off of that data. Community Development Block Grant Entitlement Program. We kind of went through this a lot in the Citizen Participation Plan. We are currently in the process of creating a contract for a consultant to do our analysis of impediments on Fair Housing Choice Plan. And obviously you know about the Citizen Participation Plan. And then again, the surveys for the consolidated plan are open until January 20th. So we've got a lot of activity. In addition, HUD has graced us with an audit. So we're working through 3 different plans in a HUD audit currently at this time. It's good timing. No, it was not in the packet. Yep. Yep. Oh, do you have the report? Oh. Well, let's do that real hopefully those instructions will make more sense now that you have eyeballs on them. Disaster recovery funds, again, we talked about that. So there's a lot of coordination that we need to do in order to figure out where that funding needs to go. And then also kind of circling back with DED to figure out what we can and what we can't do, and then when those policies and procedures for all the other programs are coming out. And then we're going to have conversations about priority on where that funding goes. Our Paul Brune Revitalization Grant, we've been working with the subrecipients of the funding, and we're working through the National Park Service. We've got environmental reviews completed for 109 and 111 Madison, and also its next door neighbor, 113 and 115 Madison. Those have come back, so we've been doing site visits to get conservation easements in place. So the next kind of step is to draft and execute those easements. And those properties that have their environmental reviews back can go ahead and start their procurement and getting their structures started to get their work done on them. With our other historic preservation fund grants, we have an RFP for design guidelines currently out, as well as survey work along West Main, Phase 2 architectural survey of the lower Jefferson subdivision. So it's kind of the waterworks in that pocket of housing that's there. With transformational housing, with their state CDBG, CV, the CARES Act funding, we're working with the SHPO to create a draft MOA, and it's a similar process with what's going on with the prison, only smaller. They're wanting to replace their windows, so we have to mitigate that window replacement there. Pending applications that we have out, we do have the community revitalization grant that we applied for. We submitted for $2.1 million to demo some of the structures that we needed demoed at MSP, and also to rehab some of the historic structures and to seal up some of the areas such as the corridor that the demo would be taking out. 203 applications were received. And we'll have the awards announced in February. So that's a lot of applications that'll be pretty competitive. The local tourism asset development grant, we submitted this to help the developer with the gap financing for the hotel. That one received 72 total applications, and those awards should be announced in March. So hopefully we'll know if we're going to get those at that time. And then we've got some other upcoming opportunities that are becoming available if those are wanting to be pursued, such as RAISE and the Choice Neighborhood Planning Grant. But other than that, that's the activities and the progress that we've had in the last month. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Spencer?
Just a couple questions. You mentioned the transformational housing. How is their timeline going? Are they? I drove by there last week or 2 weeks ago. Obviously, they got the roof replaced, and but that's kind of all I can tell. But
yeah, that's completely our fault. So they can't do anything until we go through this environmental review process.
Okay.
So when they take the funds, and we had to do radon testing and had to do a sound survey because of its location to the airport, and that's the taking the federal funds. That's the
strings attached.
Yeah. Yep.
And then number 2, the local tourism assess asset development.
Yeah.
Grant. So is that an essential part for the hotel developer to make his financing work?
I wouldn't say it's an essential part. It covers pretty easily some holes that we're finding. It makes it better. Everyone is very aware of the very keen possibility that we would not receive this grant. It is a competitive grant, and there is a plan to move forward if they don't. You know, it's not a situation where it says if we don't get this grant, we have to walk away. We're not there. But it makes the path forward a lot easier if we do get the grant. So that's probably the best way to explain it.
Okay. Thank you.
The level of creativity goes down if we get the grant. Creativity in the financing, not the project.
Any other questions, comments? I know we're running really late. We've got a couple more things to do. Thank you very much. We always appreciate that update because it helps on a lot of things that we're hearing from constituents, so thanks. I had just one thing in new business that I wanted to raise really quick, and I know we need to go into closed session, but MoDOT had a public hearing here Monday evening in regard to the proposed changes on 63, I guess basically the bridge across, and then, or 54, and then the 63. Had a chance to talk to the new chairman of Senate Transportation Committee who got an earful that night. And he indicated that there didn't seem to be much commonality in between any of the options that were laid out. And he just indicated that if he was going to push back on MoDOT, he was going to need more input from affected parties. And I know we sent the letter indicating our disapproval for the elimination of W, but we didn't really talk about others. So I don't know if you have a feel for MoDOT's timing, and we may not have time now, but if he seemed to indicate that, again, the affected parties, and as everybody knows, that's city of Jefferson over there. I think it's Ward 2, so we have a vested interest in that we may want to think about a stronger letter to MoDOT indicating not only our displeasure of closing that ramp, but the options they're looking at to replace Councilman
Well,
Kemna.
he can, I know you referenced him first, but I have a comment whenever.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I know for a lot of the projects that we do here in the city, we open it up for citizen input. You know, I mean, I'm assuming that MoDOT has this same process, like they open it up for citizen input. So, I mean, even last night I went to dinner and I was stopped, and, you know, people were, even citizens are paying attention and expressing their concerns for this project and eliminating in W and all that. So I just didn't know if here would be a good place if they had a public place where citizens can gauge their input and show their concerns as well. I didn't know if that's.
Yeah. It's on their website. They can
Okay.
go to that project. It's been published around. I guess, you know, with our, we tried to not be very prescriptive about the solution in our comments. So and we thought, you know, MoDOT would, and they come back with those two options that are more or less similar with the loop, just different configurations of it. There's a few people at the meeting that were very adamant about, no, it has to be the ramp and add on the bridge, et cetera, et cetera. So if the city council maybe wanted to take a more direct approach and say, we like this one, I don't know which one that would be, but you know, we could certainly get that back to them. But, you know, just from my perspective, you know, looking at the traffic, and David and I have talked about this a lot, you know, one of the loop ramps does seem to address our needs. From my point of view, it's, there's not, the traffic numbers wouldn't be unsimilar to many other interchanges all over the state and in this area. You know, there was some discussion about weaving trucks and things like that, but I think it would not be, it doesn't, from a traffic standpoint of view, a level of service standpoint of view, it seems to work. And so, you know, picking, you know, I personally favor option 3, but
That was
that's
one
just
all
me
the way
personally. Yeah,
that was one all the way to the right.
Yeah,
as
just
they
it goes
had-
right through the Parks facility. That would require the city to, whether it's Parks Commission or City Council, to both, you know, get that property to into MoDOT's hands to actually do the project. So we'd be still continuing to work with them to do that, but they have not settled on a particular option at this point. So.
No, and I understand that, but there was a lot of pushback from all three, and Randy indicated there were 4 other ones that that didn't even make the
Yeah.
cut. That was the top three. And I know Campo meets next week. I don't know if this is a discussion item, but I just wanted to raise it if we were on a time crunch, that if we're going to oppose, he would just like ammunition to help him go back to MoDOT. If we're going to support one, then we probably ought to indicate that also. Councilman Lester.
Yeah, so just wanted to say that at the Jefferson City Trail Users meeting last night, we talked about it, and I shared the information about how to have input into MoDOT on that issue. And I talked with Todd Spalding about the options, and option 3 and Parks. He'd like to. He doesn't have a problem with that third option and eliminating that. That they're having to tear down the structure there anyway because of the fire, and they already have plans to move the playground equipment. And it sounded like he would gladly take money from MoDOT in exchange, if that can be arranged. But yeah, certainly the option to extend the current one seemed to be what everybody wanted. I understand that would be about twice the amount of money that they're thinking of spending, but yeah, I think whatever we can do to influence the decision, we ought to do it.
Well, I agree. Yeah, I think, if we're comfortable with option 3, then, we can get that message, but there's some very vocal individuals on that side of the river that are not happy with any of the options. And I know, talking to Randy and the chairman was there, I mean, they had modeling up on some computer screens, but you couldn't see it.
Yeah.
But he says the modeling shows that it works.
Yeah.
Logically, people sitting there, obviously, with no information other than saying it's not going to work. So.
Yeah, after the meeting, I did communicate to Randy and Michelle that, perhaps if we could get drilled down and get some peak hour numbers, it'd be easier for myself or David or whomever to explain, in more concrete ways how the weaving works, from our end, to be an advocate for them, try to help them, with explaining the project. And so perhaps, if you're looking for it, when's our next Campo? It's coming up, I know.
It's next week.
Oh, it's next, the board meeting. I guess we could have a request to, support an option or not by the board, if you'd like. I know you're on the board, and
So
I don't know.
you're comfortable that we could bring this back to this committee next month? That
Yeah, they're
it's
still
not
in design
time?
and
Okay.
doing things, so.
Maybe we need to wait till after this committee before we just go to Campo with the recommendation, unless you think we need to go. I don't think we have a unanimous opinion yet on.
Yeah, that's what makes it difficult. If we were all kind of gelled around a certain option, that would be good.
Well, I mean, I would weight very highly your comments on it and your recommendations, but I know we have some very vocal individuals that we probably want to soothe down a little bit before we just say, hey, we're going to go with that one. And if we have time, that seems like that would be preferable way to go.
Well, perhaps, myself and David or whomever, another engineer with the staff can get some of the numbers from MoDOT and maybe talk about it at this meeting in a
Right.
month. Is that what you're saying? And
Yeah,
just kind of
and-
give you an update and make sure we're understanding what they're trying to tell us to, and gives us a little time to work with them and talk about that weaving issue. That seems to be the biggest one with the trucks and whatnot.
And
So-
maybe if we could get those videos and show them, because you could
Yeah.
not see them. I mean,
Yeah,
you
they
could
were
see
hard
the
to-
screen, but you couldn't see the
and they
vehicles.
weren't showing each option, both options, and they were kind of, they were hard to recognize, I think. And me personally, I'm not, I don't know if people trust those or not, but when you have the hard numbers and can explain it, and I'm, I guess, old school in my mind instead of the graphic. The graphic is correct. It's just I don't know if the public likes those or not.
Well, and again, I said a couple individuals, but obviously the three businesses, the sand plant, there was a lot more opposition than just two people.
Oh, yeah,
In
for
fact, I didn't hear anybody say, wow, this is really great, we can't wait till you get started, so.
Mm-hmm.
I don't wanna make it look like it was just, I mean, and a lot of theirs was on behalf of those businesses.
And as I left the meeting, I didn't get out of here till like almost 6 o'clock, and I'm going home, and there's a parking lot on the bridge, so something must have happened. I mean, it was backed up through town and everywhere, you know, that same night. So
Yeah.
it's important to take this on, I think.
Yeah, I think the chairman got in a
Yeah, I
long
think so.
delay.
I wondered about that,
Yes, he
because
was
I kind of knew where he was
headed
heading
home.
to. He was late for
Yeah,
dinner, I think.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll pass that along, that we have not let it go, that we're talking about it, but we feel like we've got some time.
Yeah.
So now, so I guess we need a motion to go into close.
Is that where we're at? Entertain a motion to go into close? I would make that motion.
Could we have like a 1-2 minute recess before?
Nope.
Okay.
I'll second
Not
that.
till we get a second and
Second.
act on it. All in favor to go into close, say aye.
Hold
Aye.
on.
I don't guess-
So a little bit of formality here. We need to read in the reason. So I will go
I'm
ahead and
sorry.
do that. This is a motion to go into closed session pursuant to section 610.021 of the revised statutes of Missouri to discuss the following real estate under section 610.021 sub 2.
Now Councilman Kimna has a motion to adopt that, and
My second was for that, exactly.
do we need a roll call?
Roll
or can we-
call.
So we'll need a roll call vote. We'll need a roll call vote.
Councilman Spencer.
Yes.
Councilman Lester.
Aye.
Councilman Kimner.
Aye.
Councilman Fitzwater.
Aye.
Councilman Shriver.
Okay, we got 4-0 vote to go in, so we will go into closed session after a necessary 2 to 3 minute break. And I assume someone's monitoring.
Online.
There was a
Should
question
I'll
who can
just, I
stay
guess
and who couldn't.
Councilwoman Ward and I can stay online.
So everybody up there can stay.
Everybody up there can stay.